event. So again, we want to thank you all for joining us today. Our session today is Hop Breeding 101 with Yakima Chief Ranches. And so now I'd like to turn it off to our host and speakers today. We have Joe Catron, Jason Peralt, and Ryan Christian. So guys, take it away.
Thank you, Nicole. Let me get this queued up here. Is that all looking like it should out there for everyone?
Doing good.
Very good. Cool. Well, thanks for having us today. We're excited to share what we do here at Yakima Chief Ranches. Kind of a little brief intro to our breeding program and just the different operations, everything that it takes to develop new crosses and then bring those to market. And I want to make sure and save plenty of time for Q&A at the end, because we have Dr. Ryan Christian, our technical director, and Jason Peralt, our CEO and head breeder of Yakima Chief Ranches, who can get as deep into the weeds on breeding and different hop questions that anyone might have. So I want to make sure and leave enough time for that. That being said, if there are questions that come up throughout the presentation, please send them into the question box and we'd be happy to get to those at the end. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Okay, so today's presentation, just a couple bullet points there. We'll go over just the importance of hop breeding programs. Why are there hop breeding programs? What are their ultimate goals? A little background on our specific breeding program at Yakima Chief Ranches. We'll get into a little bit of the development cycle and the different phases of selection that we go through to develop new varieties. We'll get into a little bit about our Footprints program, which is our comprehensive brand management program that ensures the highest level of quality and consistency for our brands. And we'll talk about a little bit of a few of the releases that we've had so far, commercial successes, and then our role as part of the vertically integrated supply chain of YCH and how we connect with that company. A little bit about some of our newer elite lines and the different compounds that make them special. And then we'll wrap up with the Q&A with Jason and Ryan there at the end. So I'd be remiss to jump into anything without just mentioning our mission, vision, values real quick. As a grower-owned organization, we believe that it is our duty to connect our family farms to the world's finest brewers. It seems like a simple mission statement, but it's really is a nice catch-all. If there's any activities that we're doing or any work that's being done, if we can't tie it back to that mission, then we probably shouldn't be doing it. So any work that we're, yes, sir.
Real quick, your slides aren't advancing. Just going to give you a heads up there.
Slides aren't advancing. How about now?
Yep, there you go.
All right, cool. Thanks, Jason. So yeah, there's just the mission, vision, values real quick. You can look over that. But like I said, keying in on that mission of connecting our family farms to the family-owned brewing customers all around the world. We are a completely grower-owned supply chain. Makes us unique in our industry. I think truly makes us strong and agile, and being able to connect these family farms with brewing customers all across the world is our #1 goal. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't had the chance to get out to the Pacific Northwest at all, please get a hold of us. We'd be happy to connect you with these fine men and women and get to know more about their farms and their operations and their families. They're always happy to host. So next year when we get back to normal, hopefully, we look forward to welcoming as many of you out as possible. A little bit about Yakima Chief Ranches. So out of those folks that you just saw there, 3 of those families, the Smiths, Carpenters, and the Peralts, got together back in the 80s and started their own hop breeding program. At the time, hops were, most of the folks in the Pacific Northwest were mostly raising alpha varieties and just alpha being a commodity, it lends itself to kind of boom and bust cycles, and the hop market was no different. There was a lot of boom and bust cycles in alpha production. And so the creation of Yakima Chief Ranches was really a way for these growers in the Yakima Valley to start figuring out a way to start making fair returns and to keep themselves afloat. It was a time that a lot of farms were being lost or being bought up and acquired by other larger farms, and it wasn't necessarily the most sustainable multi-generational industry that we like to think of it as today. But really, that in the green letters, I think, is the most important thing to key into is a mission to create, grow, and protect value. At the time when most growers were just farming alpha varieties, there was no real creation of value, and it was tough for them to keep value on the farm and to make fair and sustainable returns. And so these growers had the foresight to understand that not only their farms, but all of the other farmers in the Northwest needed a source of value creation. And so a lot of the aroma varieties and a lot of alpha and aroma varieties that are coming out of our program today, that it really is a source of value creation. When you're making your beers with Simcoe or Mosaic, and your customers recognize those hop brands on your beer, that's that value we're talking about. There's intrinsic value created in these novel varieties. That value is then grown and protected through our Footprints program and ultimately through the Yakima Chief supply chain, all the way through production and then getting the hops to your brewery. It's really about creating, growing, and protecting that value all the way through the supply chain. And then also Jason Peralt became the protege of the renowned hop breeder Chuck Zimmerman. Chuck was responsible through his work with the USDA for the creation of a lot of the old C hops that we all know and love, and then came and kind of moonlighted a little bit as kind of a partial retirement or last gig to come here and help start the Yakima Chief Ranches breeding program. And now Jason learned under him, and now is the Jason Peralt that is a venerable world famous hop breeder that we all know and love. So a little bit of connection too for the Yakima Chief supply chain and how that all works. I know that acronym soup can get a little convoluted sometimes, but really Yakima Chief Ranches, and by extension our Footprints quality control program, really that farm link in the cycle here. So you can see there where we're working on creating new varieties, reinvesting in facilities and infrastructure, and then really going to work on planting and growing out these new varieties, ultimately getting those hops into the hands of the people at YCH, who then process and ship those hops out to brewing customers. I think really important to key in on too is this up in the corner here, the link with breweries coming back with harvest data and lab analysis and just anecdotes and whatever it may be, and how those hops are performing in the brew house. That's incredibly important for us to know. There's our industries are very much reliant on one another, obviously. And so we believe that open dialogue is the best way for us to stay on the same page collectively and make sure that we're putting the hops in the ground that the brewers are wanting to use. So getting a little bit here, just hop breeding and the future of Aroma. Harkens back a little bit. This graph shows what I was talking about a little bit earlier, where over the last decade plus, we've really seen a drastic shift in the acres that are planted here in the United States. See that first bar there is 2011. So you can see there, just on a number of acres, there's almost double alpha over Aroma. And you look at the trends over those past years, that green bar on the right is 2019. So you can see there that well over 35, almost 40,000 acres of Aroma hops grown in the U.S., while still alpha is hovering right there about 12,500. Incredibly amazing just to see the transition and how quickly it's all happened. And just it's just amazing to all the work that's gone into it. And it's pretty cool to see all the farms really starting to be able to get sustainable returns and reinvest in their facilities and really keep their quality up to snuff, which are what all the brewers deserve, the best quality possible. And that's our goal. Pretty amazing growth you can see there. We can talk about that more later, but pretty incredible. And year after year now is last few years have been record harvests, record crops for the United States industry. So things are looking good for Aroma for sure. Looking a little bit here on speaking of kind of alpha hop efficiency and why the Yakima Valley used to be kind of the epicenter of alpha production was just efficiency. We have the perfect growing conditions here, and you can see that most of those, you see that, I guess, besides Mosaic and Palisade, the other top 8 or the other top 10 producers are all super alpha varieties. So you've got varieties that are solely used for alpha acid, so making into extract or using for other bittering products. But you can see that most of those big super alpha varieties have big, nice yields. And most of the bottom 5, which are more noble varieties, you see Centennial in there as well. But a lot of the Aroma varieties are much lower yielders. And so for us in the breeding program, it's very important to key in on Aroma varieties that are not just novel aromatically, but also check all the boxes agronomically, including yield. So why is this important? And we talked about that value creation earlier. With the Yakima Chief supply chain, the breeding program is where that value is. And what makes us unique is the breeding program, the farm, and the handler are all vertically integrated under the Yakima Chief supply chain. We believe that makes us much stronger, makes us more efficient, and it allows us to be more nimble and meet the needs of our brewers in a much better way. So we'll get into a little bit of the development cycle. That's not a typo there. It actually is about a decade-long process to bring a new variety from cross to commercialization. Year 1 in our program is the actual year that we make the cross. So going out and harvesting male pollen and introducing that to receptive female, and she'll still make cones, but they'll be heavily seeded. And so each one of those seeds is a genetically unique progeny of that cross. In year 2, we'll take all those seeds and plant them in the greenhouse and screen those for mildews and different scourges that we see in commercial production. And you can see there, just coming out there, about a 10% selection rate out of that second year. So we'll plant all those seedlings out to our seedling plot, and already, looking at throwing most of your work away. About 90% of the plants don't make it through that first round of selection. If it does make it through that first round of selection, we're able to dig that root mass up. It's only kind of about the size of your fist after growing that one season. We can dig that up, label it with quite an extensive number at that point, and move it over to what we call single hill. So years 3, 4, and 5 there, intermediate selection are what we call single hill. So that's where we're planting that one unique plant, treating it much like a commercial plant, raising it all the way to full commercial trellis, and treating it as it would be treated in a commercial yard. Oops, sorry about that. So 3 full years there of evaluation in single hill, incredibly important, looking at everything from cone set to harvest date, all sorts of different criteria that go into that. And so we can talk about all that more later when we get into the Q&A with Ryan and Jason, but it can't just be exceptional aromatically. There's really a lot of agronomic boxes that it needs to check before we even get it into the hands of brewers. So if it makes it through the single hill selections there, it goes through into stage 4 there, so years 6 through 8, our advanced lines. Again, three full years of evaluation there. Getting that up to the point where we can start using it in smaller pilot trials, start sending it out to a few brewers that have smaller pilot systems, and seeing how those hops perform in the brew house. At that point, if we've checked most of the agronomic boxes and we have kind of some short-term buy-in with growers, and getting it out into the hands of brewers, if we get that long-term buy-in with brewers, that's really what we're looking for, is convincing the grower that say, hey, this is going to check your boxes agronomically, this is going to be a good crop for you. We want them to buy in on the short term, but ultimately we want that to become a brand that sustains itself in the market, sustains itself in many of your beers and your brands. And so really in that year, the advanced selection into those elite trials is when they'll get an HBC accession number. That's when we can move those up into one acre plots or even larger plots, and really start evaluating those on a larger scale and how they perform in the brew house. Only at that point would we consider commercialization. So Jason likes to say we want to look for varieties that are being pulled into the market. There's already a couple hundred hop varieties available in the market. There's a lot of really great hops available, and we don't feel it would be very prudent to just keep pushing new brands onto the market. We really want our brewing customers to want to pull those into the market. So something to consider. We have, I mean, truly thousands of novel varieties that could be brands, but we're very, very conscious of the fact that there's a lot of other hops out there. We don't want to either be cannibalizing other brands, and so it's with very careful consideration that we will bring a new brand into market. You can see there, so prior to our partnership in Hop Breeding Company, we had a couple very nice commercial successes, most notably Simcoe. And then after the merger with HBC, we've got a lot of those brands that are very familiar to all of you: Citra Mosaic, Equinaut, Sabro, Pato. And then just last month, we released Talus, HBC 692, which if you haven't got to use yet, I would encourage you to reach out. There's going to be quantities of that available through your salespeople starting this year. We are incredibly excited about that hop on our end. It's a daughter of Sabro, and so it has a really unique Neo-Mexicanus, fruity type of pedigree, but also has just some really nice herbal notes, sage, pink grapefruit, just a really impactful, huge hop, both in the field and in beer. So look forward to having you all try that soon. So really where we separate ourselves on quality is through our footprints program. So once a brand reaches market, our other partner in HBC also goes out and begins to procure acres with growers and begins to sell hops to brewing customers. And the business models are quite different between our competitors and us. We, like I said, very much focused on long-term multi-generational sustainability for both brewing and hop growing customers of ours. We have two distinct customer bases with our growers and brewers that have distinct needs. And we feel like being able to elevate ourselves on quality and consistency is something that we can control ourselves. We are always looking to make sure more of the returns are staying with our growers as opposed to a middleman or a merchant. And we are very active in implementing quality and food safety guidelines, working with Yakima Chief closely on our Green Chief program, making sure that the quality standards, the true to typeness, making sure that the hops you're buying are exactly what you're paying for and what you deserve. So a little bit of our footprints internship. We every summer will hire recently graduated college folks from really all over the world at this point. It was all over the country, and then we've had a few international interns over the last 3 years. And so really our goal is to bring young, bright minds into our industry and give them something to consider. You know, when you're, for most folks, including myself, you don't finish college and think, I'm gonna go work on a hop farm. There's just not a whole lot out there, and people don't know about the industry. It's a very small insular community. And so for us, it's really nice to bring people into the industry that may or may not have any idea that they ever wanted to work in hops, but really expose them to our industry, get them up to speed on everything we're doing in our breeding program and our scouting programs. We'll teach them how to brew on our pilot system down there, and really just try to inundate them with as much about the hop and beer industry as possible over the summer. And so we work them really hard, and we try to have as much fun as possible too. But it's been a real joy over the years to work with these kids, and their contributions to our program and to the quality of our brands is really does not go unnoticed. So we really appreciate their contributions. I think one cool thing there, you can see that 20 of our former interns are now employed either on a hop farm or in a brewery. So pretty cool to see this internship work as a jumping off point for those folks. And so talking about that decade of development there, once it is getting to the point where we want to release it commercially, we'll start working on trademarking and protecting that intellectual property. And then really, like I said, there is the short-term grower acceptance and ultimately long-term brewer acceptance of these new brands. So we'll jump in a little bit here. And this graph, I'm not sure how well it's showing up for you out there, if it's all legible or not. But it's a little heat map. And so we are constantly finding new compounds in hops and still trying to learn about even the compounds that we can identify at this point. This is a cool little heat map that Jason put together, showing just all the variability and variation in all the different compounds. So these are all of our elite lines up here. So 438 is now Sabro, 692 is now Talus down here, but these 5 in the middle here are some of our elite lines at this point. And just kind of amazing to look through at some of those different numbers that jump off the page, usually in those red boxes there for most of those varieties, right? Whether it be total oils or caryophyllene level, we're really starting to dig into what makes these compounds so impactful in beer, and we're starting to understand which compounds can survive all the way through the brewing process, and all of these different things that are really quite over my head, to be honest. But hop chemists and people on our team are working very hard on trying to learn as much as we can about all these different varieties, especially before they get out in the market. So we can go through these a little bit, and I don't care if this might be a good time for maybe Jason or Ryan to jump in on a few of these, because we just got a couple slides of the elite lines there. I know, like, Sabro, for example, is incredibly high oil hop, super high myrcene. And then you look at its sister right there, 472, half the oil amount, about half the myrcene, but about over double the amount of caryophyllene there. So pretty amazing. Caryophyllene is that contributor to some of that woodiness, some of those white notes that you'll find, coconut, cream, woody, oaky, those types of flavors. A lot of that is deriving from that caryophyllene. But pretty amazing that it's a maternal sister, and it can be that much different coming from the same exact cross.
Yeah, Joe, I think that's a good point. I think the point of these slides really is to point out the complexity of Aroma and how many compounds are driving it. And this really just scratches the surface. Mm-hmm. This is just some of the major oil compounds that we can measure for, but that doesn't include other ingredient or active compounds within the hop, including the thiols and others.
Thiols, yep.
The point here is that it's very complex. A lot of it is genetically driven, and the important thing is that we are working to exploit that as much as possible. So these slides kind of show the tip of the iceberg in terms of that complexity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 630 here, I don't know, I think 630, there have been some quantities available over the last couple of years. This is really starting to gain some steam. A lot of people are really excited about 630 around here as well. Very fruity. Jason compares it to kind of those old Luden's cherry cough drops, so kind of artificial cherry flavor. This hop, the beers that I've had this hop in, it just seems like it's a really nice blender that really pulls out some of those more fruit-forward notes of other brands. So we're excited about 630 and what that one might bring to the table. 638 again. This one's kind of a favorite of mine, at least, is the elite lines right now. Huge lime. I get like just key lime out of this one. But it's got some just kind of like those more basic tropical citrus type flavors underneath as well. Really high citronella on this one, which I think is contributing to that liminess. But looking forward to see what this one becomes too. Super nice yielder, very nice agronomically. So this could be a star someday too. And then 692, so Talus, our newest release. This one is, like I said, just huge and impactful in the field. It's really one of those hops that what you smell when you're evaluating raw cones in the field is that exact type of impact you're getting in the finished beer, which it's very seldom the case with hops. Either they smell great in the field or just don't perform in the brew house, or they smell like diesel in the field but perform really well in the brew house. There's just doesn't seem to be a direct correlation there, but this is one of those hops that from the field to the pint is just unbelievably impactful, and we're really excited to see the future of this brand. So I guess just a nice little graph to grasp the overall impact of our breeding program and the successes that we've had over the last decade. So you can see there, so 5 out of the top 10, 5 of them were released since 2000. And then in addition to Amarillo, 4 of those are right out of our breeding program. So that's pretty awesome to see the success of our brands and really the fruition of all of this hard work. I guess all the hard work really coming to fruition and seeing these brands make the impact in the market that we're anticipating. And so with that, we'll go ahead and open up the Q&A section. Nicole, do you want to lead this section, or we can just kind of open it up for open dialogue?
That is up to you. I can read them off for you guys if you'd like. And I also have a few questions from our Whova app as well.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now then.
Sure.
Okay.
So the first question, and you guys can let me know who's best to answer, is how do you create new kinds of hops? Do you ever explore wild varieties?
I'll jump into that one. So, Joe kind of touched on it. To the first part of that question, the how is really our program is focused in on what we consider classic breeding in the moment in terms of selecting parents, different males and females, and making crosses and then running them through that decade-long vetting process that Joe mentioned. So that's really in a nutshell the how. There's obviously much more complexities to that in terms of the selection processes that you use and so on. As far as the use of wild hops, we do. And in fact, Sabro, HBC 438 was the result of a cross onto a Neo-Mexicanus, which is a wild taxonomic variety that is predominantly in the western United States. That plant, Sabro, resulted, its mother, I guess I should say, was a wild Neo-Mexicanus plant. And we have other Neo-Mexicanus lines that we're using. And in fact, there's some others, some wild plants that we're using as well within the program. So yeah, we do. We've seen some success with that. And so hopefully that answers that question.
Great, thank you. All right, we have another question from Ash. Have you explored any options to decrease the time that goes into breeding a new commercial hop brand, like marker-assisted breeding or speed breeding? If so, what has your experience been with that?
And Nicole, I can tackle that one. So the short answer to that, oh, sorry, Jason, you want to say something?
Start with that, and then I'm going to hand it off to Ryan because Ryan is the expert on this. But we are looking at ways to decrease the time. My personal feeling is that you have a decade-long development process. You kind of learn to be patient, and you got to be real careful with ways to decrease that. With that said, things like marker-assisted selection and other similar technologies, I think, will really be helpful in the future. And that's exactly why Ryan's joined the team in the last couple of years here. Well, I think we're in 1 year, right, Ryan? Just about.
Yep.
Exactly,
just a little over.
So I'll let Ryan take the question from there. But I think no matter what you do, it's going to be a long process, because even with, say a marker for a given trait, you still have to go through the vetting process in the field and the evaluation that goes behind that.
Yeah, so in terms of the speed, we're really looking at decreasing the number of breeding cycles that are required. So, as far as the typical commercialization timeline, we believe that is, very valuable to us to make sure we thoroughly vet each new individual candidate who's going through the program, and make sure what we're putting out is the best quality, the best for our growers, and the best for our brewers. So as far as decreasing the number of cycles, where marker-assisted breeding can really add some value is in increasing the efficiency of what we're doing, and really narrowing down our focus on just the best of the best candidates going forward. And within that, you may increase your selection rate to maybe 2-3% rather than that 1% that you were saying earlier for single graduates. That being said, we are exploring marker-assisted breeding for a couple of traits. Hop genetics are still in their kind of adolescence. The hop genome is extremely complex. It's about as large as the human genome, and we're really starting to wrap our minds around it, but it's still trailing behind a lot of the major crops that are out there. So we're learning. The markers that we do have are a little bit more correlative rather than causative. But we are pretty confident that in the future we'll continue to refine those techniques and be able to get a lot more efficient with the way that we do things, especially for say alpha breeding or breeding for individual agronomic traits or chemistries.
Great, thank you. I'll be posting a couple questions we have from our Whova app in the chat box. So first question from Joseph: what thoughts and data go behind choosing a male plant, and how do you keep them until you're ready to use them?
That is, I think an ongoing challenge of hop breeding is how do you select for males when phenotypically, the actual expression of the flowers is much different. Males don't produce cones, they have a completely different floral structure. So it's not a apples to apples comparison when you're looking at things like yield. So really it boils down to looking at the growth habit, looking at the density of flowers, things like that. And I think every hop breeder I've ever worked with had a different way of looking at males. So I think it kind of comes back to some of the art in breeding. So everyone has a different idea what they feel is a positive trait in the male, at least slightly. So it's a challenge. It's a difficulty that we can really only overcome at this point with a series of test crosses and things like that, and looking at the progeny to see how well those males perform and how well they breed. Not much different than say like cattle breeding or something like that. With that said, and maybe Ryan can speak to this, or maybe he already did, but that's where I think a lot of the value in looking at the underlying molecular genetics and the marker-assisted selection, things like that, I think will really have quite a bit of value in the male side of things as we begin to understand that more and what they're contributing. Ryan, wouldn't you say that's accurate?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's definitely part of the increasing efficiency of what we do. With genetics, we can find some of those traits that are matched in the male phenotypes, things like alpha content, chemistry, the cone structure, yield, that we can only guess at, or kind of find proxy measurements to guess what those are going to do. We can also, one of the major ways that you can evaluate a male is doing progeny tests and just crossing it with known females and seeing what you see in that generation. With molecular markers, that does promise to eliminate some of that work that's required. We'll see moving forward if that's efficient or not, but that's the promise of genetics.
Great, thank you guys. Second question from Whova, I'll be posting it in chat as well. This is from Josh Lindsay. If something produces amazing aromatic and flavor compounds, but the agronomics are not ideal, how or where do you draw the line to continue working with a variety or just shelf it?
It's tough to say that there's an actual, I would say, line drawn. You know, the important thing is that a new variety, something that we release, has to be economically viable. And there's always some play. If something just is incredible from an aromatic standpoint and just offers something completely new and unique that's never been seen before, there's obviously value there. But if it doesn't yield well enough, then it either the economics are going to dictate whether or not it gets grown, and that means can it be offered? Is it unique enough that it can be offered at a price that supports growing it at the lower yields? And if it does not, or if it cannot be offered at that price, then it probably won't go anywhere. So we typically try to target kind of a baseline yield that's going to be in that kind of Simcoe Citra range. That's going to be in that 8 to 10 bales to the acre, to try to at least drive some of that value proposition from the agronomic side. With that said, I think that particularly as we learn more about the functionality of hops and some of these minor compounds that we're seeing that occur not in parts per million or parts per thousand, but parts per billion or parts per trillion, it's going to be very important that we pay attention to those hops, even if they don't yield possibly quite well, because they still have a lot of value from a breeding standpoint. We can still take those plants, use those in crossing, select against those traits, assuming they're genetically heritable, and that can drive a process of population improvement going forward.
Great. All right, we have one more question from Huva, and then we'll get back to the Zoom Q&A questions. So this one is also from Joshua. Is there any information about what breeding programs are currently in the works, or what breeding may be done in the future?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but there are probably, I think the other day I kind of counted it up in my head, but there's probably about a dozen breeding programs across or in the U.S., and that ranges from public, and then the larger, more involved private programs, and then down to even some of what we'd consider more of a small scale or almost hobby level breeding. So I mean, we have a fairly good handle on what's out there in terms of what's in the works. And Joe and Ryan, you can jump in on this, but I think that what newer breeding efforts that come online are really trying to track with what's going on in craft beer in terms of trending on the juicy styles of IPAs and the quest for more and more uniqueness or more fruitiness and things like that. So I don't know if you guys have any comments to add to that.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan. I would agree with you, Jason. I think it goes back to that slide where it discusses how important it is to have a closed loop here and to have that open dialogue and to make sure that we're getting the hops that the brewers need, but also we need to hear from the brewers, like, hey, I'm getting variation here, or this year's Citra was just a little bit different than last year's, or why. I think that open dialogue and whatever the questions may be, our job is to serve our brewing customers the best we can, and so we need that open dialogue and that communication to really make things work for both parties. So as far as future, what breeding may be done in the future, I would agree. Like, what we are seeing coming out of our program is really helping lead the way in the American craft industry and global craft industry at this point, really. But what happens in the future, that's yet to be decided. And I think it has a lot to do with consumers and breweries and just the different trends that we may see.
And I'll jump in and add a little bit to that. One trend that I've seen in the last year or so of new brands and new patents that have been filed is for more sustainable hops, especially when it comes to noble varieties. So both in the U.S., coming up with the varieties that offer kind of a U.S. answer to noble varieties, and then in Germany and Czech Republic, some new higher yielding, more drought tolerant varieties that are able to stand in for some of the traditional noble varieties as well.
Great. Well, we've got a few more questions in the Q&A. So I've got one from Ian here. Do you monitor hop generations for mutations? If so, have you encountered any mutations that might make for an interesting new trait in existing brands?
I'll lead off, and Ryan, you can finish out with any comments you might have. But we have not identified, or our actual identification of what we would consider a mutation has been limited. I don't know that we've seen much in terms of actual. Well, it depends on the type of mutation, I guess you're talking about. But we've seen some instances of small somatic cell mutations like that result in variegation and things like that. My experience has been those are not very stable. They don't last very long. But we've also seen no examples of spontaneous polyploidy. And if you want to kind of categorize that as mutation, we do see that quite commonly, and have actually had some instances of being able to exploit that. With that said, things like point mutations, other similar types of mutations, I've not had the opportunity to really exploit that and utilize that or even monitor for it. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say at the level of tissue culture, a lot of work has been done at exploring mutations and how tissue culture specifically impacts some of the methylation, DNA methylation, and microsatellites, which are typically markers looked at to examine diversity. We don't see a lot of mutations in gene structure at all in tissue culture, with few exceptions. In the field, we're not actively looking for mutations like that. It'd be at the level of just a kind of a crude phenotype, and even then, out in the field, it can be difficult to tell the difference between a true mutation and, say, a seedling or an off-type that was planted. And to Jason's point about, say, variegation that pops up spontaneously, there's a difference in the way that hops are grown and propagated versus, say, tree fruit, where these kind of discoveries are pretty routine and routinely exploited. In tree fruit, where you're getting growth from buds above ground on shoots and branches that you can easily select from year after year. Hops are grown from rhizomes in the ground, and so a mutation will pop up one year, may not pop up the next. So it's a little difficult, or it's more difficult or more challenging to find those kind of mutations that are stable year to year.
All right, great. Well, we have a couple more questions and then we'll kind of wrap it up. So next question, how do you match the breeding program with long time to market with future craft market needs? Example, how much does hop breeding program dictate the craft beer style development?
That's a good question, and one we get quite a bit, because when we kind of were alluding to it earlier, I mean, how do you have that kind of crystal ball when you have a 10-year product development cycle, and you really don't? So it kind of becomes a chicken and egg. Are we driving style development, or is it vice versa? And I think they work hand in hand. The important thing for us is, we've been doing this now our breeding program has been actively operating for around 30 years now. And the important thing is having a robust selection process. And this is kind of my opinion, and it goes back to somewhat of the art of the breeder as well. Having a robust selection process and keeping that, a genetically diverse basis for selection, so that you can continue to answer new demands as you see them coming forth. If you've been very narrowly focused in your selection throughout the years or one or a few traits, say just alpha or just noble types, then you're going to have a difficult time answering new demand and answering to changes in consumer preferences. But if you've had a robust selection over that period of time and continually brought in new material and kept that base wide in terms of genetics, you have a little bit easier time. But it's still the ongoing challenge, and there will never be a quick answer to that. But certainly we hope to answer it by constantly having something new, developing new things, and bring that up. The other thing that's important, I think, is to consider that sometimes we, as consumers, we don't know what we want until we get it. And so sometimes you got to be looking for something new and original, and put it out there and see what happens. And if it, if it takes, it takes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But so you got to be willing to take a bit of a risk on some of these things as well.
Great. Well, last question, and I think this might be something that each of you can answer if you want. It's kind of a fun one. So if you could breed a hop and pick the perfect characteristics in it, what would they be?
Joe, why don't you lead us off on that one? I'll finish that one out.
That's a good question. If I could breed hops, then I could be the expert on here. We wouldn't need Ryan and Jason, but we need these guys to breed hops because I can't. But as far as a consumer goes, and what I really enjoy in beer and then just in raw hop form, man, it's tough to say. I smelled some Simcoe the other day, some fresh hop Simcoe that smelled like pineapple rings hanging from a spruce tree, and it was just about doggone perfect in my opinion. But yeah, early pick Simcoe, really punchy, I think is one of my favorites. That being said, like the with Talus and a lot of those Neo Mexicanas varieties, kind of peachio, real just rich, juicy stone fruit. I think it's really nice in beer as well. But yeah, I think going back, and I was going off to the last question a little bit, but consumers are just more promiscuous than ever, right? I mean, I'm sure all you see it in your breweries and have somebody, I've seen it with Omaha, this guy drinking a beer at the bar and be like, that's the best beer I've ever had. What else do you have? And they're constantly wanting to try what's new, what's next, what's new. And so I think, yeah, to Jason's point, having a broad germplasm to draw from, and from our perspective, being out in the breweries, getting to know our brewing customers, getting to know what styles that they like to make, what styles their consumers like to drink. It's a big, diverse country we live in, and different styles dominate in different areas. And so really it's keeping that close communication with our brewing customers and making sure that we can meet their demand for whatever it may be.
I'll go and jump in there. So yeah, in my opinion, there is no such thing as a perfect hop. That would be, that'd be a boring world we live in. So I think there's a lot of power in diversity and variation, and having different styles and different types of aromas and characteristics that we can lend to beer. That being said, there's a lot of different ways that we can add value, both at the growing side and agronomically, sustainability, or in the brewery. So whether that's having a really unique and impactful hop chemistry profile that really shines in the beer, or whether that's having something that's very high yield and fits in our picking windows for our farmers, has a mite tolerance, or is resistant to different diseases, so we don't have to manage it quite as actively, and we can do so more sustainably. I think there's a lot of potentially perfect hops out there, but yeah, definitely not any single one set of characteristics that I think that anybody should be focusing on. Sure.
Yeah, I think Joe and Ryan both said it really well. This is similar to that question I get often, that, people ask me what my favorite beer is, and my answer is usually a cop-out answer of the one in my hand. And it's kind of the same way with the hops. To say what is perfection is really difficult to answer. And I think it really comes down to what these guys said, that it's all about value creation, and where the perfect hop is going to add value for the grower. It's going to give him sustainability for the future, not just for his immediate future, but for his family's future as well. And then also it's going to provide value to the brewer in his brew house and his process, and ultimately provide the customer with the ultimate drinking experience. That's what I think we talk about quality a lot, and our customers, quality is everything. And it's all about the liquid at the end of the day, and giving not just a the chance to drink a beer, but actually giving a positive drinking experience. So that's kind of the way I see it. Is there such thing as perfect hop? I doubt it, but I know it's going to yield well. It's going to be disease resistant, and it's going to offer enough value to the brewer and ultimately the drinking customer that we can spread enough of that value across the supply chain and create that sustainable situation that we're all looking for.
Great, thank you guys. Anyone else, any last thoughts before we kind of wrap things up here? All right, well, let me do a couple last things. So again, thank you guys so much. Just wanted to extend such a huge thank you to all of Yakima Chief Ranches, but especially you guys, Ryan, Joe, and Jason. So thank you so much for presenting today. It's a lot of great and valuable information. And just a reminder for everyone again that was on the chat today, this was recorded and it will be posted on virtualharvest.com and uploaded to our Whova event app, as well as the presentation slides have already been uploaded to both of those, so you can feel free to download those at any time. So otherwise, that's it for me. And thank you everyone again for joining us today on this virtual harvest session, and hope to see you on some future ones coming up. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.